Hi, everyone. Deborah Hamilton, Hamilton ADR, North Carolina. Also, the Why Do Pets Matter podcast, which has been just going gangbusters. I'm so glad all of you are here today, whether live in person or listening to it later. There's so much I want to get to, so I don't want to start late. And when everybody comes, we'll check in. And if nobody comes, you'll get the benefit of me talking about one of the D's, and maybe two of the D's going forward. We have the 7 or 8 D's, depending on how many I remember on any given night. But the MAAP plan is that plan you make to care for your pets if something were to happen to you. And I know everyone thinks they have that plan in place because they've talked to their neighbor, they've talked to their mother or father, they've talked to their sister or brother, their kids. But really, taking the time to make a written plan will be so much better for your pets going forward. It's interesting, today on Facebook, there was an article that a colleague of mine put up about whether or not your pets love you. And it is an interesting article because psychologists will argue that they do or they don't, depending on what kind of feelings pets have. It was really a fascinating article. I'll give it to Rose to put at the bottom of this podcast. But the bottom line was that animals read our body language, read us, and do what it is that we like them to do because they've been conditioned to do that. So not to make a plan for their care going forward when they have sort of modeled their entire life about responding to your input is one of the most incredibly difficult situations to put your pet in. It's the one thing you shouldn't forget to do. Hi, Jan. How are you? Glad you're here. We're just starting, and I'm talking about making that plan for your pet. There was an article that I'm going to put in the show notes. I can actually look it up really quick now, about a psychologist who said that, do your pets love you? And of course they love you. However, they love you in a way that psychologists would argue mimics how you treat them. And so if they learn to live with you and love you the way you need, some people like them to go sit in the corner. I always say that my girls love me by leaving me alone, and my boys love me by being in my skin, because that's just the personality differences. However, your dogs respond to your personality. And so when you don't make a plan for them going forward, no one knows what you've set these dogs up to expect. And the person who's going to take your dog doesn't know what to expect from your dog. So it's always great to make this plan and be conscious of the things you need to put in for the people who are going to take care of your pet short-term, long-term. So again, the MAAP plan stands for making a plan, addressing the needs of your pet, appointing caregivers, and of course, publishing. What I'd like to talk about tonight, we always talk about the D's. And Jan, I don't know if you heard last week that the D's run amok of 6, 7, or 8, because we always think about death, divorce, disease, disaster, dementia, deployment, delay. It's just the list goes on and on. We always find a D to go with it. And one of these days, I'll sit with some of my longtime attendees and get all of them down and write them on a piece of paper and bring them with me. But just know that there are so many things that can occur. I just was interviewed for the New York Bar Association's Laws and Pause. And the person who was interviewing me said, I never thought of that. Now, here's a lawyer, right? Here's someone who went through trust and estates in law school. I know they did because I did. Everybody does. And they never thought about putting something up to make sure their pet isn't taken out of the house if something happens to them and put into a shelter, animal care and control, and then maybe move to a rescue if I'm unconscious and I can't get in touch with someone to say, yes, I want my dog, or if I haven't put anything in writing on paper that this neighbor of mine or this sister or brother of mine can say, this is the dog that my sister entrusted to me until she comes out of her coma or whatever. We've talked over the years, and if you go back, because it's been 2 years now, if you go back to some of the discussions, we talked about all the animals that were taken by animal care and control during COVID and placed by rescues. Now, these people were doing corporal works of mercy because we didn't know if anyone was going to live. However, when they did, and they got over this trauma of having to survive COVID, only to survive it, and some of them found out their only companion in life had been given to someone else. And it was given to someone else because they were unconscious. Nobody even paid attention to the dog, or maybe they released the dog to animal care and control because prognosis was terrible. So they thought they were doing what was best for the dog, and the dog was placed, and then the person lives. And then the person's like, but wait a minute, I want to get my dog back. And guess what? That doesn't happen. And it simply is because we haven't sat down and taken that moment to make the plan you need to make to navigate that journey. Now, maybe you want the dog to, if you are really ill and you might be in the hospital for 6 months, to move on, because that way they're not living in a kennel or living with someone who, doesn't take care of them the way you want. Maybe that is better. But if it isn't, then you have to write down the plan you want to make. So I'm going to check in with everybody today. I'm going to tell you that my knee is much better. I did not do damage to it 10 days ago when I walked too much, 12,000 steps over 2 days. I will tell everyone that no one tells you when you have knee replacement surgery not to walk. They tell you to do your exercises. They tell you to take your medication so you are pain-free. They tell you all of these things, but they do not tell you not to walk more than about 800 steps a day. So I am going to be on a mission now for anyone I know who's having knee replacement surgery to tell them, do not walk, even if you feel fabulous, do not walk more than 800 steps a day, because you can get incredible swelling. So anyway, gotten the swelling under control, gotten the pain under control, and I'm a much happier person right now because of it. And my boy Junie comes home tomorrow, so we'll see how that works out, because he may break me, but I'm hopeful he doesn't, and we'll see how that works out. So I'm going to check in with everybody. I've been rambling about certain important things about making a plan and writing it down, but I'm going to check in with everybody now to see how they are. Jan, welcome back. Tell us about what you're up to and how far you've come and what you've done, and did you put the sign up on your fridge?
I did put the sign up on my fridge. But can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what happens if you have absolutely no one to do that? Are there like foster groups that will actually take a pet for someone so it doesn't go through, an adoption group, or get turned over to someone who could adopt it out, just in case for some circumstances, like you have no family members, I don't know, you have no friends, immediate friends that will take it, for whatever,
Believe me, that's the biggest question for people. They go, but I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone who wants to take my dog or dogs. In fact, there's an article in this week's New York Times, Sunday Times, that said it's a dog's life if you want it. And people adopted dogs during COVID and now have to go back to work and are in a position similar to where they don't have anybody to walk the dog during the day or to do any of that. And so they're either giving the dog up, or they're afraid to ask their friends because their friends might feel obligated to do it, but really don't want to do it. So how do you find those persons? Well, ultimately, if you buy from a breeder, they should be able to at least point you in the right direction or take the dog back. Like, so for my dogs, if someone called me and said, listen, I was, God forbid, diagnosed with cancer, and I can't take care of the dog right now, I would tell them, listen, I held a dog for 18 months for a gentleman who went for triple bypass surgery and took a year to recover. And I had that dog for a year. Now, did he stay with me? No, there was a couple who was waiting for a puppy from me. And when I let him go to them for the 18 months, they had the benefit of this wonderfully behaved 6-year-old Irish setter. Then they got the puppy and wanted to trade and keep the 6-year-old Irish setter and give the puppy to the old man with the new heart. However, they knew that they had to give the dog back, and we wrote a contract, very simple. We're going to love on, and they lived about a mile away. So it wasn't like I was giving him to Timbuktu, but because I'm a reputable breeder. If you buy from a reputable breeder, they will take your dog back. But Susan's had this issue too because her breeder is retired, and so she doesn't do this. I'll retire when I die, taking my dogs back. But some people, retire to places where they can't have a dog that's more than 30 pounds, and they raised 100 Irish setters, right? So that's a problem. So what you want to do is, where did you get your dog from, Jan? You muted yourself because you were so nice. Were the dogs barking?
No, mine was adopted, and I'm one of my people on my list is the person who fostered him, and I know she'll take him back because she said she was going to be a foster failure if I didn't take
you
it.
Didn't show up. I remember. Yeah. So
she would take him back, but I'm just thinking of circumstances where somebody gets a dog and really feels like they have no one that they can leave it with, whether there are people who literally like fosters who will take a dog for, maybe an indefinite period of time, depending on like you said, for, so they don't go through the whole ordeal of having to losing the dog if they happen to recover or when they recover.
Absolutely. And so if you get them from rescues, right? The rescue should take them back.
That's what, yeah.
I'm hoping and trying to work with rescues, especially during this period where people are transitioning back to work or whatever they're doing, to create some sort of a doggy daycare kind of thing where they can leave the dogs if they have to go on a vacation. I mean, not on a vacation, but on a business trip or something, because they're revamping and they might not have the money or whatever it is, that they would take the dogs. Also, it's very hard to find foster families now for even rescues. So it's hard to find foster families for people who only want temporary foster families. However, I always say, call the rescue that you got your pet from, call the person you bought your pet from, if it's a pet store or if it's, someone who doesn't tell you in their contract that the dog has to come home if something happens to you. They likely aren't going to provide you with support, but they might, and they might know someone who is looking for a dog. So if you bought the dog for a rescue and somebody just came through looking for a Siberian Husky mix that's, sort of 3 or 4, and you happen to have a Siberian Husky mix that's 3 or 4 that you adopted from the rescue, then maybe you guys can work it out. I love when I help people, share dogs. So, 6 months on, 6 months off. That's sometimes, almost always, a divorce situation. But I've had people who have adopted a dog from rescue, and then the owner showed up because the owner never relinquished the dog. And in the parlance of the rescue, they do not tell you who, they do not let you know. If you go to court, you can't get it back. The contracts are sacrosanct. However, some of them have seen the dog in the neighborhood. And so with coaching from me, they go up and talk to Jan and say, by the way, that was my dog. And then, of course, Jan gets frightened and says, it's my dog now, it's my dog. And I teach them to say, no, it is. But I would love to work something out with you that if you go on vacation or, something comes up, that I'm here. So these kind of things can occur. You can find people who will help you. I mean, if you go to the dog park, there's 8 people with dogs there. Don't ask the dog walkers. They'll watch everybody's dog. But I actually spoke to, if you've ever seen the commercial where the woman out in Oregon, and I actually met her at Starbucks with the 2 dogs. There was a really big dog and a really little dog. And she let the little dog lick the ice cream cone first. And she said, I'll show you why I let Bugsy go first, because Mammoth, has a certain way of eating an ice cream cone. So she let Bugsy eat the ice cream cone, and Mammoth is standing there watching. And then she goes, okay, Mammoth. And Mammoth just, eats the entire ice cream cone. And she goes, and that's why Bugsy has to get his before Mammoth, because he just eats it. And I said to her, love to come to your group and speak to them about making a MAAP plan. They all work for Nike out in Oregon. And she said, well, they all know that I'll take them all in. I said, how many kennels do you have? She goes, 30. And I said, so how many clients do you have? She goes, about 500. And I said, so if Mount Helena, that's even in the same area, but say, the tidal wave is coming, or the, volcano is erupting or whatever, and everybody's running and they're giving you their dogs, how many can you ultimately take? And she goes, you've got a good point. But people don't see past that. What you want to do is you want to get a relationship with someone who's going to be able to take your pet. So that could be the vet tech. You can ask the vet techs, and some of the vet techs, almost all of them, and even the front desk people have dog sitting on the side. And you can work something out with them so that if something came up, you were going for knee surgery and you really needed somebody to hold the dog. I mean, my dog went to a hunting camp for 2 weeks, and I called way before surgery and I said, this is when I'm going to have surgery. I would love for him to come down and spend those weeks with you. And she said, well, he'll be running in the field and he's going to rip all his coat out. And I said, well, that is what happens when he has fun. So we're okay. But I made the plan to do that. And if she hadn't worked out, if she couldn't have taken him, I had someone else who's the person bringing him to me tomorrow. She was going to hold him unless her girls went into season. And so we were crossing our fingers that the girls didn't go into season, and they didn't. But first was the hunt, and then was you're absolutely right. And that's the biggest complaint I get at workshops, Deborah. I have nobody I can call. And I go, yes, I know, not a person. I said, however, we are going to go through your Rolodex, and people you meet while you walk the dogs. I think you weren't here, so you didn't know this, what I did in Pleasantville during COVID. All of the people who were my dog's caregivers lived outside the state of New York. And so, as we know, the governor of the state of New York at the time, Andrew Cuomo, shut the borders to New York. Nobody could come in. And I went, oh shit, if I get COVID, the people who are supposed to take care of my pets live in Maryland, Connecticut, and Kansas. So they couldn't come and get my dogs. Those are the people. So as I walked my dogs, I would meet the people who had dogs and say hello. And then I'd watch where I saw people with dogs, and I put 3x5 cards in their mailboxes with my name, address, and telephone number. And I said to them, if something happens to you, please call me. I'll be happy to let your dog out in the backyard to go to the bathroom. I'll be happy to feed it, until you can find someone to do it long term. But I'm willing to do it for a substantial period of time, as long as, you put something in writing and you let me know. Call me up and tell me, oh, I'm Connie Kohler and I live down the street, and, please take care of my Wheatons if I get sick. And so we just had to work it out. So I must have handed out about 15 of them, and 8 of the people came back to my house and said, thank you so much. We never even thought of that. And we will take care of your dog too. So you offer to help, and then you get in return someone willing to help you. And then you get to know them on that level. You talk to them, you see how they take care of their dog. First of all, what I always talk about in the workshops is nobody's going to take care of your dog the way you do. Nobody. There's no one on earth who's going to take care of your dog the way you do. But if they walk it and they feed it and they give it kisses, even if they feed it too much or they feed it too little, or they walk it not enough or they walk it too much, the dog's going to survive, unless it's really old and they're walking at 7 miles. But usually people are smart enough not to do that. But you're absolutely right, Jan. That's the biggest question. And that's the biggest question we solve in the workshops, because we actually give you the ideas of who in your neighborhood and in your life that you can tap into. I can tell you that some of my workshop participants have found that their eyeglass person, the receptionist at their eyeglass place, loves dogs and walks dogs, and they never would have even thought of asking them. But, we open up the sentence with, I love my dog and this and that. Do you know anybody who watches dogs? And they either say, no, I don't, or they say, well, I do. And then you start that conversation. We have to be really proactive. So does that answer your question a little bit better?
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, yes, I was just wondering because, I think to my, I don't know, but it does answer it. I mean, I was just, because obviously
it's scary.
The last thing you want is for your dog to go into a shelter or something and then have the possibility of not getting it back.
And if you leave one number on the refrigerator, that might happen because of the fact that that's only one person who might not have their phone on ring and they're at the movies, when you're like,
right.
Oh,
right.
So there always has to be 3. That's my number. Although ASPCA had a program that I watched and we talked about it one Wednesday evening where one woman said, you need 20 people on your list. I said, I can't get people to find 3. And she's telling them to find 20. How about a barrier to entry? People will never even try if they think they have to get 20. 3 is a nice number. And of course, one has to be wherever you rescued him from. Just say to them, listen, I will leave it because the North Shore Animal League now will take your pet while you're sick and they'll charge you a certain amount of money. And then they'll either give it back to you or place it depending on what you talk about. And you can go back to your place where you adopted it from and say, listen, Susie was the foster for the dog and she's first on my list to take Bugsy back. I apologize. I forgot your dog's name. What's his name?
His name is Tonka, like a Tonka.
So, I love that. So the foster will take Tonka back, but if the foster isn't available, I'd love for you to be second on my list so that that when, the foster answers the phone, because she didn't answer the phone, that she's already said that she will, and you'll hold it until she gets there because you want to make this redundancy of care. And then, of course, vet techs, groomers, dog walkers in your area, even if you don't have the dog walker. You have to have someone come and watch your dog if you go somewhere. You just have to.
Well, I have 2 people. Since I moved a year ago, so I have 2 people in state that are really close that could do it temporarily. I would not. And then I have 3 people out of state where I was who would,
take him, long term. Yeah.
Long term, but I'm thinking if something like, like you said, like something
like COVID, they shut the state,
or something happens and you're like, oh my gosh, they're not going to get here in time. Where the other 2 live within probably, 3 to 6 miles away. So if need be, they could.
They will be the people. They're on your refrigerator saying, in case of emergency, all these 2 people. And then those 2 people know, okay, we only have to walk and feed Tonka for maybe a week. And then whoever it is from out of state is going to come and get Tonka. And at least they're going to contact the people out of state. So it's the 2 on the spot. And then they have to know who to call secondarily. That's really important.
But you're making me think that I obviously need more than 2. Like I would like to have more than 2 on my immediate list. I don't know, because I'm just,
the more the merrier, the more the merrier, because, God forbid you put everybody's name here on the list, right? And all of us are busy that night and we don't answer the phone. So it really is important to have as many as you can. Here in North Carolina, I have 6 people on the new refrigerator who live in this neighborhood who said, oh, we'll take care of your dog. And I'm like, you can take care of my dog in my house. They all want to take him with them. And I'm like, no, he stays in his house. That's my big bugaboo. I love that people want to take the dog to their house. And I'll ask all of you what you think about this. But and if it's a break the deal, if they have to come to my house to take care of the dog, then I have to probably reevaluate. But everyone seems to say, okay, fine, because your dog is comfortable in your house. Your dog's been alone in your house, so it's not like it's someplace new for them. So they're not going to chew up the couch in your house, where they might chew up the couch in the other person's house, and they can't get away because they wouldn't want to because they live there, and B, everything is sealed up, and so the dog is really safer. So initially, you want the people who are close by to just leave the dog put and come and let it out 3 or 4 times a day, for half an hour. And do what they can. And if they have to take the dog, I know, Connie, you have people who would take the Wheatons down the hill or around the corner because you're all Wheaton people and know, the Wheaton personality. But if
actually, it's just the opposite. The nearby people are both Spaniel people, one Welsh Springer up the hill and the other up the hill and around the corner, Cocker. Yeah. My Wheaton people are more remote, but Jan, to speak to your point about you have to have more than 2, I think I mentioned either last time or the time before that, for instance, 2 of the 4 people on my list, the 2 Wheaton people on my list, are traveling with me in 2 weeks up to the Northern California Terrier Association specialty. So they will all be with me. And I'm showing one of my dogs. His mother is going to be boarding right down the hill at my vet. where she will be very safe. But in case, God forbid, anything happens, I do have nearby people who will not be with me. So that's why you want that redundancy too. And in fact, one of the Wheaton people who's going to be going with me up north, this past week, she has a consulting business. She was in New York City. She lives in Ventura, California, which is 90 minutes up the freeway. She was in New York City, and then she was plane hopping her way back to California on consulting business all the way across the country. So she was effectively out of pocket for a week. Yeah. If I had had only one other person on my list, I would have been nervous.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking that, my friend who I asked, I mean, she used to travel a lot, but she's not traveling, she and her husband, but they do go away a lot. So, so I definitely need more than two or as many as I can locally. I mean,
right. And the nosy neighbor is always, a really good friend to have, because they're right there on the spot. All they have to do is, take care of the dogs in their place. And then wait for someone else who's more of a long-term caregiver to show up. So that's always, you need the on-the-spot person, and then you need the long-term caregiver.
Right.
That it seems insurmountable, but really, as we have found in the workshops, people talk about what they've done to find caregivers, and people sort of do the V8 smack of the head. Oh my God, I never thought to ask, as I said, my eye doctor is receptionist, because, you just start the conversation. And they either say, wow, I never thought of that. And then you bring them here and we all have another wonderful party. Or they watch dogs. I mean, the neighbor down the street must have told me 14 times how she watches dogs. And I'm thrilled she watches dogs, and she'll be watching mine. So let me check in. Connie, how's everything going?
Sorry, I'm late. But I'm here. Yes. Everything is going fine. Thank you very much. We had a big rainstorm on Monday. In California lately, it seems like we're getting, the whole season's rain all at once. And we did that again, Monday into Tuesday, with sort of some sprinkles tomorrow to boot. But the good news is, that will keep the fires at bay, at least for a while. So being in California, the big D for us is always disaster. And we're always absolutely ready to move at literally 5 minutes notice. Yeah. If a fire is coming over the hill. So, that's a big thing. Fortunately, we're just doing fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Wonderful. And you leave next weekend for the dog show?
The week after. We actually leave 2 weeks from today, on Wednesday the 13th, and then show that whole weekend over Easter weekend. And hopefully we will have an early bring time Saturday. We hope to beat it out of there very quickly.
Yeah. Before the holiday traffic.
Exactly. And that would cause another delay.
Yep. That would cause another D, the delay.
Another D. Right.
Yep. And whether or not you could pick up Miss Mouse from the vet before they close, or, another day. So it's all.
Yeah, another day. Yeah, she would. I couldn't get her Sunday anyway, because they are closed and it's Easter. But certainly if I couldn't get in to get her right away Monday morning, I would not be happy.
I know. That's a long time. Susan, how's everything with you, and how's Maggie doing?
Maggie's doing well. She's, eating her little heart out, and she's so cute. She comes up to my feet and licks them when I'm eating dinner, so I'll pass on some food to her. So
she's got her science down. This article that was in the New York Times, it's A Dog's Life. If you want it, it absolutely talks about how dogs have really become part of our lives. And then the other article that I'm going to put at the bottom talks about whether or not our dogs love us, or they have just really patterned their life based on what we have taught them to do. So not that they don't love us, but you know how the psychiatrists and psychologists are, right? They can define everything, and it has to fit into a certain, DSM, so to speak. So there was a great article. I'll give Rose the link, because I sat there and I said, wow, this guy really went through the whole decision-making process of what we do and how pets interpret what we do, and how we interpret how pets interpret what we do. So it's like this whole thing. It was really a fun article to read because it really isn't necessarily, what we would expect. Hey, Kieran, I'm going to check in with you. How's everything going over in Tenerife?
Hi, Debbie. The weather here is worse than Ireland, which is very, very strange. It's raining non-stop. So,
Oh, God.
So it's very strange. It's either sandstorms or rain. But I think there's going to be one good day of weather tomorrow. So
you'll be outside tomorrow.
no, I have a couple of friends coming over. They really picked their moment.
I know you always invite people when the worst weather in Tenerife. People always, equate in their mind palm trees and beautiful weather. And it seems that all of your friends from Ireland who live without palm trees and in terrible weather come to you when there's palm trees and terrible weather.
Terrible weather, yes. It's so important to treat everybody equally.
That's right. We don't want you to feel special. Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. And Leo is doing well. Any news on?
Little bit of news. I'm going to run through 3 Ds anyway for tonight. So these are sort of odd. So the first one will be just what you were talking about, but I with redundancy, I would say when you're planning to draw up your list of who should be on it, a little bit of diversity would be no problem, for the simple reason it's quite possible that 3 or 4 people on the list might run into exactly the same problem at the same time.
Yep. So diversity. Well, we are really, I said I'm going to get everybody together to give me all the Ds because I keep forgetting. But diversity is huge. Absolutely. And that goes with when I said that people, older or younger, in your neighborhood, outside your neighborhood, great diversity. Perfect. Okay, next.
All right. The second one is an old one, and this is only for Jan. Jan, very sorry about the delay in getting the link to you, but I have sent it to you. Right. Then I suppose where is it? Yes. Now, there we are. Can you see that?
Yes, it's about champagne. We're all coming.
Bottle of champagne, yes. So this will be basically delight for the book. We were informally told of something very good, but because it's informal, I'm going to hold it over till next week.
Okay.
But we're into champagne territory, all right.
Yes, so, fabulous.
So I will tell you all about it next week when it should be formalized, hopefully on Friday. But something we've been working on, and we were told the good news just yesterday. So
wonderful.
I'll explain it when I'm permitted to do so. So yeah, so that's about it for the moment.
Perfect.
Yeah. Perfect. So that's your balance. What is it? Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue.
Something blue. Yep. And diversity is now added to the list of Ds. I'm so thrilled. And it so perfectly speaks to what it is we need to do. So when Jan was checking in with us and saying, well, what do you do? The diversity of people near and far, the diversity of people old and young.
Just if I could, Debbie,
Sure.
On that note, if there's a dog owner out there who says, well, I don't know who I could call upon. I'd say, now, I'm just saying as a way to get the problem aired and introduce yourself to people. The whole, since the MAAP plan is a complete new innovation, it's the type of thing that the local radio stations would love to have people talk about. Yeah. So, and then, people who listen to the local radio stations tend to be people in their homes and in cars, and they usually have a dog or two. So they would probably say, yeah, we could look at that as a partnership rather than anything else. So that's one possibility. The other is the famous mums groups on Facebook.
Yep.
That they are sort of a hidden resource, but they run into thousands and thousands of members, and just a simple post up there. It's also dog book clubs. So I would say in this day of the internet, it's the notion that I don't know anybody can be very easily solved. Now, that brings in a different type of dynamic, another D for you, a different dynamic, which is where you have to spend time to getting to know them and getting to trust them, which is very different, But in terms of, if you like, first contact, the world is very open at the moment for that.
It's so interesting you brought that up, because when we do sit down at the workshops, people say, well, I belong to a dog walking group, or I belong to a book group. It doesn't even have to be a dog book group. It's just a book group. And you start having that conversation and say, listen, we all have dogs here. What do you say we attend the MAAP, free call and get some ideas on how to build our map so that we all, I certainly don't want to take those crazy terriers, but I would hold on to those crazy terriers for a day or two. I live down the street. I have to tell you that I've had 3 friends who hated dogs. And they used to come to my house with the 13 Irish setters and lose their mind. Okay, Susan, I see. Thank you. I'm so glad you came, and I'm glad your people were late. That's good. But the interesting thing is there were so many people who were anti pet. They don't want a pet, who were more than willing to help with the dogs since they were staying at my house, right? And once they watched my dogs once or twice, and came over and did it with me, so they knew what they were doing. It takes time, it takes effort to build that relationship, to trust the person who may or may not have pets, who says, oh, I'll take care of them. You really want to make sure that you work on that relationship, both from the point of view of your friend knowing your dogs and your dogs knowing this person, because a stranger walks in, your dogs are like, who's this? I know that Sally and Gordon, who are, by the way, on a boat in the Caribbean, on a sailboat, catamaran in the Caribbean, as we speak, having a gay old time, and their 2 old girls are home with someone who they had in their house 6 times before they left for a shorter trip and came back. And now they're on a longer trip. And of course, there are 3 people who are their backups. I'm the 4th person. And if God forbid anything occurred, I'd be in a car in a minute, driving to New York from North Carolina. And they knew that because it's my left leg. It doesn't harm me to drive 8 hours. I'm sitting anyway. So I would drive up and get the girls. But they had somebody there for 24, 48 hours until I could get there to, get the girls. But these are the kind of things, it takes time. And that's why people often say, I don't know anybody. And I'm like, absolutely, you don't. You really don't, because we don't really think about it in terms of, I have to foster a relationship. And that's why when I sent those 3x5 cards out during COVID, it became so clear to me that helping someone take care of their pets can often be the best way to have that person turn around and say, boy, I'd love to take care of your pets. And as I said, it could be somebody who doesn't have dogs, who doesn't want dogs, who doesn't want the expense, but will take your dog because they like the intermittentness of it. I have a woman who's a exercise guru. She actually was my son's 6th grade teacher, and she was the best teacher. I'm so sad she doesn't teach anymore. Now she does spin classes and things. And she became a foster, like your foster, Jan, right? Who's a foster fail only once. She has 1 dog, but she takes dogs in all the time. And she says, I only want 1. And I will take 4. She said, but I only want 1. And so you never know unless you ask. So that's why building these relationships, having the people come in, especially if you ask someone over a glass of wine, Connie, will you take care of my Irish setters? Connie doesn't have dogs, but she loves my Irish setters. And every time she comes to my house, she plays with them and she thinks they're wonderful. You have to take the time to say, Connie, I'm cooking you dinner Friday night, or Saturday or whatever. I want you to come over and we'll sit and feed the dogs together. So you can get the rhythm, because to give them just written information, that's important. If God forbid something happens to you in an emergency, and at least you have something written down so they can follow that, Junie gets this much food and Roxy gets that much food and Athena gets this much food. But it would be better if you brought them in. And if they want you to reciprocate with you for their pets, you have to say, hey, I'm bringing the wine, let's grab a pizza and let me see how you feed the dogs, because you want to be able to do that as well. It's really, really important. So Jan, do you have any other questions? Oh, sorry, Connie, I didn't see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Well, you were talking, Kieran, about the fact that there are moms Facebook groups and book clubs and so on and so forth. Deborah, since you were in North Carolina, you were right near the headquarters of the American Kennel Club. And speaking of Facebook, AKC now has a whole bunch of different groups by breed, Facebook groups that are relatively new. For my breed, it's called Team Soft-Coated Wheaten Terrier. And so if you were to get in touch with AKC, you could certainly start with my group. You could certainly, because Barb Ostrom, whom you know, who lives up in the Central Valley of California and has been on these calls, Barb is part of that group. I'm part of that group. And certainly you have an instant in with the Irish Setter peeps.
Well, I'm part of the Irish Setter Club America group on AKC and on
There
Facebook.
you go.
Everywhere. Yeah.
There you go.
Jan, for you, is there a predominant breed for your dog?
I mean, I would say, look wise, but personality wise, it's different.
Well, what's really interesting? I just thought of this, Connie. They probably have an ILP group at AKC.
That's what I'm thinking of too.
So the ILP, Jan, is the dogs who are competing in AKC performance events. So that would be agility and rally and everything else. You don't have to be purebred to compete. And so I'm sure AKC has created a group for people who have ILP dogs.
But they're actually now called Purebred Alternative Listing, or PAL. That's how they are listed for performance and companion events if they want to trial and title.
Wow, I missed that switch from ILP to PAL. That's a much different, but that's a great idea. But AKC does have many things. They do have information about making a plan for your pet. They just don't have a group like this that actually holds your hand while you're doing it, because that's the biggest thing. So many people come and spend some time with us, but then don't follow through and do the plan. Because it's hard to do all these little pieces to select those people. And then
sorry, but I'm thinking that, you have to start somewhere.
You do.
So even if you just even if it's not perfect,
right,
at least you say, okay, well, at least I have 2 local people and 3 far away. So you start there. And then as you add people in, just change the list, or you change it, and
you have to check in with them all the time, Jan, because people's lives change and they don't necessarily remember that they said they take care of your dog, and then they move to a condominium or townhouse that doesn't allow fencing, or that doesn't allow a dog more than 30 pounds and your dog's 50 pounds, and they forgot because it's something they said over a glass of wine. So you're absolutely right. And perfection is so far, as you can tell by these calls, off the mark for me, because I want you to find your way in your own way. I'm going to help you think of a million things to do, and then you got to pick and choose from what I say to do what you can do, but to always have a view toward navigating that journey your pet's going to take when you can't care for it, short or long term, because that's why you're here. You want to navigate that journey. You don't want it to be sort of by the seat of their pants. There they are sitting at home for COVID, they were sitting at home having a gay old time, and these people in hazmat suits came in and collected them. Imagine the trauma those dogs and cats went through as these hazmat people came in to collect them, and they had no idea. And then all of a sudden they're in an animal care and control shelter, and then maybe they're in a rescue if they're purebred, or they're still in the shelter, and then somebody adopts them and they're in a new home, and talk about shell shock. So you're absolutely right. This isn't, you have to have everything put together to join this group. That's why I have it every Wednesday night. Rather, it's about getting those juices flowing. And every week, there's a great book out there that I love. It's called Atomic Habits. And he talks about going to drive by the gym every day. So you might not go in the gym, but at least you're getting in the car and driving to the gym. And so someday you're going to park the car and go in the gym because you've made the time to drive to the gym. And he said that he has a client who did that for about 6 months, just drove to the gym, but was so heavy and felt so embarrassed he couldn't go in. But then since he had conducted this habit of going to the gym and parking in the parking lot. He decided to get out one day and he said, this wasn't so bad. So you're absolutely right, Jan. You have to start somewhere. You have to find a person. Most people say, I have one person. That's better than none. You have made a huge leap because now your dog at least has Connie Kohler to go to because you met her here or whatever, and she lives down the street and who knew? But those are the kind of things, you're absolutely right. That's why we put this group together.
And one of the best resources, Jan, is your vet. I would start there because one of the vet techs may be dog sitting part-time. In fact, when my boy Casey's litter was on the ground 3 years ago, and I had a huge family illness going on, and had 6 brand new puppies, I had 2 vet techs from my vet come in and take care of the pups when I had to go out of the house. My big girls, the mom and the grandma, knew the vet techs for years. They were comfortable with them. When they came in the house, everything was cool and there was not a problem. So I would really start with your vet if you don't have any other dog resources. If you belong to an obedience club or even a play in the park kind of club.
I work with pets. So, I have a fairly, and so it might be, one is it's something I can talk to my clients about because I don't know that they have plans.
Right. And I'm happy to speak to them. I'm happy to speak to them. I'm happy to have them come and we can do a private if you want, if there's a better time, because what you want to do is you want to get those juices rolling.
Right.
If you're part of a group or you run a program, I almost always talk to my colleagues who are dog trainers. I went out to Colorado and did a whole program for a colleague of mine because she said, I just want you to get these people to start thinking about this because I can't take all the dogs. Like I have 25, people who are working with me with their dogs. And if an emergency happens, they all have me as their number one person to take their dog. And I can't. I have 3 of my own and I'm going to be evacuating when the volcano comes as well.
Or thinking that, like most people I know, at least, where I came from, it was very uncommon for people to have multiple dogs.
Yeah.
And most of the people here that I know have multiple dogs. So that's another issue. It's not like you're asking, like people are saying, okay, if something happens to me, take one dog. My client here has 5 dogs.
Yeah.
And then you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, ranging in varied ages. She has like a, 7-month-old beagle puppy. And then the oldest one is 14, so, unless you're splitting them up and certain people are taking certain ones, that's another added factor. So, I might say, okay, well, I'll take a few, but I don't know that I'd want 5.
Right. And would you let them long-term or short-term? Right,
exactly. And I might, well, if it was 2, maybe I would take them long-term, but if it's 5, I don't think I want 5 dogs long-term, and
how are you going to find homes for them? If you took the 5, exactly. How are you finding homes? So that's why this has to be a conversation you have as the pet's owner, the 5 pets owner, before it happens. As I said, I broke my ankle in 2013 and I'd never had this conversation. I had 13 dogs. Like, who's taking 13 Irish setters? And none of them were puppies. Shoot yourself. You just want, my husband said, you're the only crazy person. I go, you're right. But I'm sure there are a few people out there who are just as crazy who need to also make a plan. And the thing that really upsets me is I've been to a lot of rescue events where people who have a lot of money and adopt a lot of rescue dogs out of the generosity of their heart, and they're wonderful, believe their family is going to take those dogs when push comes to shove. And I can tell you that almost never happens because they don't want their dogs. They don't want the misfits. They don't want the dogs with special needs. And they will never tell you that. They'll assure you that they are going to take care of the pets. And maybe you'll put something in your will that says, well, if they don't take care of my dogs, then they're cut out of the will. Well, that's even worse because then the dogs will be staying with someone who loathes and detests them. And you don't want that either. So it really makes it. I had a friend who told me her daughter was going to take her dogs. And she called me a week later and sat down and made a MAAP plan with me because she said, I want my daughter to feel free not to take my dogs if it won't work for her. if she's in a situation, what if she gets divorced? What if one of her kids are sick? What if she has to place her dogs? Whatever happens, you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know. So even though your kid, I mean, my kids love my dogs. They love them. Neither of them could take them right now because one has a cat and my dogs love to chase cats. So that would work really well in a 1-bedroom apartment. That would work so well. An Irish setter and a cat in a 1-bedroom apartment. And he's on the 2nd floor. So God forbid the person below, it would be a nightmare. And the other one lives in a no pet building. Now, was that stupid? Yes, it was, but that's what he could afford. And so, you know, there's nothing he could have done. So these are things that are so important that you can address with your friends. They're more than willing to, you know, if they sign up, they don't have to ever attend. They'll get the recording, and they can go get past recordings where we talk about other pieces of the MAAP plan, which is, you know, why do you have to publish everything? Well, because the people who are your caregivers have to know about each other. And the people who are going to enforce these things have to know about each other. So it's your vet and your attorney and all the caregivers, your breeder. If you co-own, you need to let them know because, oh my God, if you give your dogs away and they're co-owned, you're going to leave the fur hitting the fan for the people later. And it's sort of like, why didn't you straighten this out before? Because yes, Connie loves your dogs and she's the best person for your dogs, but you didn't speak to Kieran, who specifically said, you can't place my dogs. They have to come back to me. So you need to have that difficult conversation. So I know I'm really talking a lot today and I apologize, guys. Let's wrap up. Connie, why don't you start us off on something that was said tonight that was really important that you want to reiterate?
Well, I think going back kind of to where I jumped in, where we were talking about, you know, if you work with a breeder, the breeder should be able to take a dog back that cannot be kept in a family situation where the dog, you know, has been placed. I will say when you are going to look at a puppy, when you're a prospective buyer of a puppy and only go to reputable breeders, one of the first things to ask is, do you have a contract? And this is not just for show prospects. This is for a pet. There are 2 types of contracts from a reputable breeder. One for a dog that is, quote, show quality, although that's a pig and a poke, as Deborah knows, because you never know how the pup's going to turn out. And I've seen some pet prospects go on to be grand champions on the flip side of that. But the other thing is a pet contract. And in both my contract types, I have a provision that if for any reason you or your family cannot keep the dog, I am the party of first refusal. The dog comes back to me. And if I cannot keep the dog myself, I will find a proper home through, again, reputable sources. And all of that is spelled out. There is absolutely nothing left to anybody's imagination. So again, the importance of dealing with only reputable breeders and reputable rescue groups.
Yeah, because they take them back as well.
They take them back as well. I was the chair of my local breed club rescue team. And we always had in our contract with the adoptive parties that if for any reason, same deal as in my puppy contracts, if for any reason you cannot keep this dog, it comes back to the Soft-Coated Wheaten Terrier Club of Southern California.
Yep. And Rescue has that in their contract. So again, when I talked about having that difficult conversation with your co-owner, if you have a purebred dog, if say Connie is the best person to get the dog because she knows the dog, she's lived next door, she's watched the dog every time I've gone away. We both are, you know, kindred spirits. I watch her dog, she watches mine. She'd be the best person to keep it. She doesn't have any dogs right now. So in rescue, it's the same kind of thing, but you have to have that conversation. You have to speak to them and say, listen, I know paragraph 13 of my contract, either a puppy contract or a rescue contract, says that you have to return the dog to me if you can't keep it, and address it and say to them, listen, I see in paragraph 13, it says this. I want to honor that. And I want you to know that Deborah Hamilton, who lives next door, knows Tonka so well. It's Tonka, right? I knows Tonka so well. She's been my neighbor for 10 years. He's 10 years old. He knows her. So what can we do to facilitate if something were to happen to me, that Tonka would then go to her? So I understand that the contract says that I have to give it to you, but if we can put something in writing that says you're aware of the fact that the rescue is aware of the fact that the neighbor would take the dog, and that's by virtue of having a conversation with you. And then what I do, and I know what Connie would do, and most reputable breeders will do, they'll interview that person, that neighbor. And if that neighbor seems like a really nice person, I'll take their name and their number. And then I'll send them a contract that says, if anything happens to the dog, then you have to call me. But yes, you can have Jan's dog if something happens to Jan. But we have to execute a contract that says that in the event something happens to you, the dog comes back to me. Because ultimately, what the rescue wants to do and what reputable breeders want to do is make sure they keep their dogs out of the shelter rescue pipeline. They want to be, part of, and the rescues want the dog to be in their pipeline, so they keep track of those dogs too. It drives me nuts when people adopt all these dogs and nobody checks in ever on whether or not the dogs are thriving. And it drives me nuts, especially with horses. So we can talk about horses some other day, because there might be a horse person on like there was last week. But it drives me nuts that people allow these very large animals not to have a soft landing. And they're not easy to place. So you're doing a yeoman's job, Jan, and talking to your friends who have more than one dog, really important. So Kieran, anything?
Oh, no, nothing to add, Debbie. I think you had a marathon session tonight that covered everything.
Perfect. And Jan, anything you want to wrap up with? Did you come away with something that was hopefully helpful? And if I can be of any assistance to your colleagues, it really is just, the tip of the iceberg. And I certainly hope I never make anyone feel bad if they don't have a plan, but I definitely want to put the little tickle in their ear that it's something they need to do.
Well, I just think that I'll start to talk to people about whether they have a plan. And I mean, mostly because when I do work with animals, I'm working with animals that are, that have health issues or that are older, that really, and I have news for you. I mean, having been there myself, and probably all of us had, knowing that, knowing some of their family situations, I don't know that they have a family member, or if they've thought about what happens to them, who's going to care for that dog, as close to what they would do as possible.
Right.
And
especially if, say, the dog is diabetic, or if the dog has skin issues, or if the dog has food allergies. Do they even know? Does your family even know?
Yeah. I mean, in one case, I know that those few cases, I mean, I know that their family probably knows, but the amount of care that these people offer their pets, I can't see like many people. I mean, I've done that for my own animals, but I can't see many people who take in a dog going through that.
That is why the A for address the needs of your pet has to be specific for that pet. Because, okay, so we might buy them very expensive food, and we might, it just might be pampering, right? That's one thing. And a dog will live just happily on less expensive food in a loving environment, right? That's fine. But if it's medicine, or if it's daily care because they're incontinent, these are things that people really need to know and need to take on board. Otherwise, you haven't given your pet the chance to move forward with
and I cannot stress enough the pharmaceutical aspect of the MAAP plan. And that has to be updated as your dog ages.
Yep.
For instance, Patsy, who's at my feet, after her breeding career was ended and I spayed her, became hypothyroid. She was, she was 6 years old. So she's on thyroid meds for the rest of her life. It's like me. I pop a Synthroid every morning and we're done. But nonetheless, somebody needs to know that, she's got that thyroid medication.
Tonka's on one medication and, 2, 3 supplements and, herbal meds and, and so next to his, I mean, I have literally where you can get them, or whoever wants, like, one get when I get at the vet, but the other ones, where I order them from and what the, the item number is. And that has been updated just because he's not been on the same thing for his entire life. And neither was my last dog or whatever. But most of the clients I have, actually, their dogs are on quite a bit of medication and things like
Right.
that.
And what if
your
your dog has a really serious condition like Addison's disease, for instance, where the medication, where the dog can be managed and the dog can live a full life, but the medication is horrifically expensive?
No, I know. I mean, I actually allotted that for my last dog because she
Yeah.
was really, really expensive medication. And when I decided I was going to have, I actually stipulated in my will what money I wanted to go for her care because of that. Because I figured I didn't want it to be a burden to anybody else. And so I figured that wasn't fair to me. It's one thing to say, okay, so-and-so, will you take my dog? And it's another thing to say, okay, well, do you have an extra 12 grand a year for medication or something?
Right.
Like, I mean, just like,
And then of course, as we always point out, having all those directives in your will is fabulous, wonderful, terrific, but will not come to fruition if you have a stroke and you're unconscious, if you are suffering
Right.
from dementia.
Exactly.
So you really need to make it something that's a living document as well as a document post, death, because if the money isn't there, that's why I always say, the pet trust is something, or an annuity or something is really good to have, so that you can have the person have the funding to take care of the $12,000 a year they're going to need to take care of the dog if they're in need. And nobody wants to not take care of the dog the way they should, but they definitely need to have assistance, especially if they're doing it because you can't for a short period of time or for a long period of time.
Right.
It's really key. So I'm so glad everybody was here today. Deborah Hamilton, Hamilton Law and Mediation, soon to be Hamilton ADR, North Carolina. And of course, this wonderful group, my MAAP plan. And don't forget to listen to Why Do Pets Matter? Because we have some great people coming up. In fact, some of them are animal rights, animal welfare people. It's been just fabulous. So until next week, kiss your babies for me. Kiss Tonka and kiss the two terrible terriers. And Kieran, we'll just send kisses to you because you don't have anybody right now visiting.
Right.
And I'll let you know how it works with Junie. If I'm broken next week, I'll let you know, but hopefully he will not kill his mother. So everyone, have a great evening. And I'm so glad you were here.